I'm back. And unfortunately, I think I'm gonna have to carry it again, so good luck. I'll try to stand still-ish. Alright, so for a pressure volume curve, it's basically following the cardiac cycle. It just looks a little bit different. So this is your pressure, this is your volume. So you start right here, about maybe 50, go to maybe 120. So this is your end diastolic, end diastolic volume. This would be then your end systolic volume. And then you're gonna max out your volume there, pressure's gonna rise, right? And then as your pressure gets high enough, your volume's gonna drop as your pressure rises, and you get back to here. Okay, this is your systole phase, this is your diastole. This is when the mitral valve will close. This is known as your isovolumic contraction. This is your isovolumic relaxation. Right here, your mitral valve will open. Right here, your aortic semilunar valve is going to open. And over here, your aortic semilunar valve is going to close. Isovolumic contraction is like this distance, but how high the pressure is, because we could have, say, that my pressure went way up here. It followed the same inotropic line, but my pressure went a lot higher. Right, whoa. Right, then I would go down like this. So this part right here is now my afterload. Right, because it's the pressure that I had to overcome in order to get rid of all my blood. So that's what that is talking about. This is your inotropic line, right? Inotropy is going to be basically based off of your calcium levels. It's known as your like contractibility or your excitability. So you can have a much steeper line, something like this, right? And then your, let's see if I can make that any better actually. If you had a steeper line, something like that, right? Then yours would go like this, and you have a bigger stroke volume. The distance between the box is your stroke volume. So that's your inotropy. This end diastolic volume is also known as your preload. Okay, that's basically it. Okay, now for your baroreceptors. Let's not delete what I drew on. Alright, so for your baroreceptors, essentially what's going to happen is it's just following like your homeostatic pattern. So you have a stimulus. Well, you have your stimulus. You have a receptor. You have your control center, your effectors, then your response. Okay. Your baroreceptors are detecting stretch. Okay, that's what they're detecting. So let's say they're detecting an increased stretch. Okay, that is basically going to be read as an increased blood pressure. So your baroreceptor is going to send increased action potentials to the control center, and the control center is going to want to decrease that blood pressure. So it's going to decrease your sympathetic and increase your parasympathetic. It's going to affect your heart and your heart rate, right? It's going to slow down your heart rate. It's going to cause that vasodilation, right? And the response will then be to lower your blood pressure, right? It does that through that dilation, right? So that's one option. The other option is you have a decrease in your blood pressure, right? So you're going to have decreased action potentials being sent. It's going to increase your sympathetic and decrease your parasympathetic. It's the same effectors. It's just going to have an increased blood pressure effect, right? Where it's going to cause your camp to increase. It's going to increase your inotropy, your chronotropy. It's going to make your heart rate go faster. And then it'll increase your blood pressure. So that's actually how that works. Things that regulate MAP. Well, mean arterial pressure is equal to cardiac output times peripheral resistance. So things that affect peripheral resistance are essentially vasoconstriction. Things that regulate your cardiac output include your stroke volume, heart rate, venous return, right? All variety and all of those things would affect that. Stroke volume could also just be considered like blood volume, right? That would affect your cardiac output. So all of those things are going to regulate your mean arterial pressure, and your mean arterial pressure is essentially just like your average amount of pressure, and the pressure that is maintained in your arteries. So that's your mean arterial pressure. Okay, let's go ahead and do capillary exchange, and then we're gonna call it a day. So you've got your capillary, and you've got your arterial end and your venual end, right? And this graph that we showed with the mean arterial pressure, there's also like, you could think of this like as locations: your aorta, arterioles, or arteries, arterioles, capillaries, venules. So essentially what this graph is showing is that down here, the blood pressure is like way lower, right? But on your arterial end, right down here, on your arterial end, you're gonna have a hydrostatic pressure of 30. So this is your HP. It's a hydrostatic pressure of 30. Then you're gonna have something called BCOP, which is controlled by the albumin found in your blood. Your BCOP is negative 28. It's not actually a negative number, it's just being pulled back into the capillary. Then you've got your ICOP, which is also albumin, which is 8. And then an IFP, which is controlled by the lymphatic system. And that IFP is going to be a 3. Okay, so on your arterial end, between your hydrostatic pressure, BCOP, ICOP, and your IFP, you're going to have a net total pressure of 13. On your venual end, everything else is exactly the same. So BCOP's the same, ICOP's the same, IFP's the same. The only difference is that your hydrostatic blood pressure went from 30 to 10, right? So now you only have 10 millimeters of mercury for your hydrostatic pressure, but again, everything's the same. So that's going to give you a net total of -7, okay? Then if you total that, your total pressure, your total net filtration pressure is 6 millimeters of mercury going out. So that is 6 going out. And then the lymphatic vessel is going to suck that up, clean it, and then it's going to eventually dump all of that fluid and that pressure back into your subclavian veins, I believe. Yeah, your subclavian veins. So that is what's happening there. Now, edema is where you have a buildup of this 6, right? 6 is like what it's meant to handle, what it wants to handle, what the lymphatics want to handle. But there's different edemas where you get a buildup of it. So you could have hydrostatic edema, you could have osmotic edema, permeability edema, or lymphatic edema. And basically, you're just messing with one of these. So hydrostatic edema, increased blood pressure. So that could be like pregnancy, things like that. Osmotic edema is an increase in your BCOP. Or no, sorry, a decreased BCOP. A decreased BCOP. So if there's like less albumin, right, if you have a decrease of that, that would be your BCOP. Permeability edema would be an increased ICOP. This is what like histamine does in allergic reactions, as well as like damaged cells when you're talking about like breaking a leg or something like that. And then your lymphedema is just going to be a damaged lymphatic vessel. So this guy right here is broken. It can no longer suck up that pressure. So that's where you get your, like, I think it's called elephantitis, and that's by a parasite that starts to destroy those. So, and then the definition of edema is just like a buildup of fluid in between the tissues in your capillaries. And so that's going to be that space right there. So that's it for this video. I hope you enjoyed so much, Jordan.